Friendship is a comedy where we follow Craig Waterman, played by Tim Robinson. He's a husband and father who doesn't have much going on outside of his family. He ends up meeting his neighbor Austin, played by Paul Rudd, and the two of them become friends. But unfortunately, things quickly go south as Craig's uncanny behavior wards off his new friends and leaves him feeling broken and betrayed. So this movie is a showcase of Tim Robinson's wacky humor, but at its core, it's a story about the difficulties of building new friendships. It shines light on how hard making friends can be when you don't really have many, specifically with male dynamics in play. The movie hilariously digs into some of the insecurities we have that we rarely talk about. It really hinges on our recognition of our irrational but deep-rooted insecurities around bonding with other men and having our intentions recognized as platonic or impartial, as opposed to coming off as romantic and desperate. It does this by hilariously framing Craig and Austin's friendship in a similar way that a meet cute or a coming-of-age story would depict intimacy. This creates beautiful cringe comedy by showing us two grown men whose friendship is built on a foundation of the most precious and infantile human characteristics. Craig's perception of friendship, and honestly probably everything, is exactly what you would expect from a person who has spent the entire first 40 years of their life in an empty room watching cartoons and coming-of-age stories. He's basically a clueless dork. He is very excited about his new friend Austin, the same way that a little kid with no friends would be really excited about his first playdate. That same childlike energy is also present in his dynamic with his wife Tammy. She sometimes feels like she is written as his mother for great comedic value. Craig's entire personality is the product of what some of you will recognize as Tim Robinson's iconic humor. He is over-the-top cheesy and wildly unpredictable. If you've seen his show, I Think You Should Leave, you already know what to expect. This movie is packed to the brim with totally out-of-pocket dialogue in obscure situations. It has a variety of comic styles. Besides the Tim Robinson stuff, it also has some slapstick humor and some funny little sketches, like there are scenes of Craig's fever dreams playing out that are really wonderful. There are so many bizarre gags in this movie that just work, like the choice of music that he listens to while driving is conceptually funny given the tone that's been set. It's very quickly established as a dark and eerie movie, but with a man-child protagonist for irony. It's basically a spoof of family dramas, so all of the eerie stuff just ends up being hilarious. And the dramatic lighting and production design furthers this by making the movie visually seem a bit bleak. Writer-director Andrew DeYoung clearly understands how to establish and manage tone, because it's not just relentless noisy humor from start to finish. The movie knows when to be noisy and when to be out of pocket, but it also knows the importance of giving it a break and easing tension. Pretty much every time my face started hurting from smiling so much and my tolerance for cringe comedy was being tested, the movie eased off a bit. That whole push-pull rhythm is important when dealing with cringe comedy. Too much and it can just be really exhausting, but then too little and it can actually be cringy, like cringy in a bad way. Going into this movie, I was actually a little bit worried because I personally cannot watch more than a full episode of I Think You Should Leave in one sitting. I just can't binge watch the show because it just gets a little bit exhausting after one episode. I think that show is better in small doses, so I was worried that a whole feature-length film's worth of Tim Robinson would be too much, but the amount of noisy humor and cringe comedy was handled well. Assuming that you have a tolerance for cringe comedy, of course. If you are prone to suffering from secondhand embarrassment, this movie might push you to the limit. One of the friends who I went to see the movie with and another guy in the row in front of us were both audibly struggling with how cringy the movie was. There were parts of the movie where you could sense that something humiliating was about to happen, and these guys would just go, "Oh no." At one point, that friend of mine actually opened his phone and was just like, "Oh man, I can't." Like, admitting later that he still enjoyed the movie. It's just the secondhand embarrassment was that real. If you're wondering if the secondhand embarrassment is too much to handle, I'd say this movie is right on par with Curb Your Enthusiasm. To me, cringe comedy like this is like dipping your feet in kind of cold water. Like, it seems off-putting at first, but if you just embrace it and jump in, you'll get used to it and you'll probably enjoy it. So even though this movie is just absurd and is definitely not meant to be taken seriously, I did have some thoughts on the strange blend of characters. Some of them are very animated like Craig, while others are normal. They obviously need a fair amount of normal characters for Craig's behavior to seem bizarre in the world of this movie. The other weird characters made for some pretty funny moments, but they also leave you thinking that Perhaps Craig isn't that bizarre since unhinged people like him aren't that far and few. There's honestly a mentionable amount of inconsistency with Austin. Sometimes he's very childlike and strange, like Craig, and other times he's just a normal guy who has no tolerance for Craig's weirdness. And then his friends go from singing to each other in the most cheeky fashion to then having normal masculine dynamics literally only one scene later. I was also surprised by the direction that the movie went in. At some point, it stops feeling like it's about finding friendship, and it more so feels like about finding fulfillment and priorities. Mainly because the story becomes more focused on Craig and his wife, and less about Craig pursuing Austin. The movie was still funny during this point, but I was really left wondering when Austin was gonna come back in the picture, because his dynamic with Craig was really the best part of the movie. But those criticisms are trivial when you think about how funny this movie is. This is not the movie that you go into hoping that it has a profound story. It's an absurd comedy movie, and it delivers on that with its tastefully cringy goodness and its perfect cast. This movie is utterly hilarious. I personally thought it was incredible. If you are a fan of Tim Robinson's unapologetically cheesy humor, this is a must-watch. It is currently on a limited theatrical release, but it is set to expand next week. This is definitely a movie that you will want to take all of your best friends to go see. Thanks for watching this review. If it brought you any value at all, please give it a like. It really helps the channel grow. I'll see you later this week with my review of Hurry Up Tomorrow.